Welcome, everybody, to the April installment of SHINE, which is School Health Information and Nurse Education. My name is Kate Lefkin. I am the Chief Communications Officer here at Montana Pediatrics. I'll get into that in just a second, but for anybody who has not been part of a SHINE session, I think I've said quite a few times I don't need to be broken record again for those who've been on for a while. Just about putting your name and where you work in the chat. So you'll probably see that going on the side. But just an outline of how this is going to go for today. So we'll start with a really quick mention of Montana Peds and then an ask of you all. And then we'll have a presentation from Holly Carey, our fantastic presenter coming to us from Billings Public Schools today. This whole entire portion of SHINE right now is being recorded. And then once we get to the end of Holly's presentation, there's a question slide. I'll jump in, have Holly take these screens down, and then stop the recording. This topic is a little bit different than some of our past ones. I don't envision any specific details about students or families really coming up in this one, but if they do, just please remember, to be cognizant of HIPAA and FERPA, to not share too many revealing details about students. And then following the presentation in the chat, I will include a link to our post-session survey, which helps us build these programs, identify topics. And then just as a reminder, these programs are built by school health professionals across Montana for school health personnel across Montana. So definitely always looking to you all for more support and insight. Really quickly, who is Montana Pediatrics and why on earth is a pediatric organization presenting at a school health program right now? So Montana Pediatrics is committed to increasing access to healthcare, quality healthcare, I should say, for all of Montana's children. One of the things that we really realized is in a lot of instances across the state, a school health professional might be the only health professional a student sees throughout the year. Last year, we started this program in a different format under a different name and solely focused on type 1 diabetes for the purpose of increasing kind of knowledge and care for kiddos with type 1 while they were at school. And then heard a lot of feedback about additional topics and how to support other students while they're at school. So now we are in this SHINE program. Throughout all of SHINE, we've kind of hit on a lot of the main buckets that Montana Pediatrics works. We've done a little bit around just general health, on-demand care. We had a care coordination session around supporting students with medical complexities back in December. We've talked about mental health twice now. Our first session of the year was about diabetes. But everything Montana Pediatrics does, for the most part, is all virtual. So we're a telemedicine organization by Montana's pediatric providers. So we don't outsource care to providers from other states. And the benefit of that is, while we may be a large state geographically, we're kind of a small state in terms of community. I think it's more like 1 to 2 degrees of separation in Montana instead of 6 degrees of separation. So we're really rooted in community, in continuity, access to care and quality care. So again, a lot of kids, especially in rural Montana, a lot of instances where a school nurse or a school health professional might be the only health professional they see throughout the year. So kind of a little background on why we are bringing this to you today. Holly, you can go ahead and go to the next slide for me, please. Awesome. I put new-ish on here because I said it was new 2 months in a row, and I feel like you can't say it's new for 3 months in a row. So it's new-ish. But back in February, the SHINE program received accreditation through the Office of Public Instruction here in Montana. And so anybody eligible or wanting to acquire professional development units through OPI can do so. You do have to participate in the live session. And then complete the post-session survey. Again, that will be in the link. I usually put it in at about 5 minutes left in the presentation. So completion of that survey is required. to obtain an OPI credit. But this is a fantastic opportunity for us this year. And then I've continued to hear asks about getting credits again for nurses too. So something we'll bring back. So we'll offer OPI credits and then CEUs for nurses as well, and see if I can get that one done by May. If not, it'll absolutely be in place for next year. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Holly. This is my last one, and then you can stop listening to me talk, and we'll pass it over to Holly. But we're in April, which means we only have one more session left for Shine this year. So I am reaching out to see if anybody would be interested in being part of our Shine planning committee for next year. I feel like a lot of you are rolling your eyes or groaning, as I usually do when I hear the word committee. But I promise it's pretty low barrier. We meet for about an hour every other month. And really, this group will be responsible for helping come up with the session topics based on feedback from prior sessions. And then what I'm really looking for is kind of representation across the state, both in terms of roles. Again, so helpful to see everybody's different roles in the chat here, in terms of role, in terms of location, in terms of your background and experience and whatnot. But just this program is such a unique opportunity to bring oftentimes, really clinical professionals to schools. And then this opportunity like we have today to hear from some schools to help others in the development of new programs or whatnot. So anyways, I would love it if you would consider joining my little committee. I promise it'll be simple and easy and not require a ton of time and effort, but I really value everybody's opinion in terms of building this so that it's valuable and resonates with everyone. So that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Holly, which Holly, I think your next slide. I hope this is my last one. Yes. Okay. Now it's off to Holly. I had the privilege of, I think, like quite literally running into Holly at the Jeremy Bullock Safe Schools Summit last August in Butte. And if none of you have ever been to the Jeremy Bullock Safe Schools Summit, I highly, highly, highly recommend attending. I believe this year it's in Billings. It was a fantastic 2 days full of increasing awareness and ideas and programming for safety in schools. And that ranges from mental health safety in schools to physical safety. Oh my gosh, there's probably, I don't know, there were like 12 different topics and different session tracks you could take last year, but really encourage anybody to go who has the ability to. But I met Holly at our booth, and I think we talked for like an hour. I talked about our Shine program a little bit, and she was just starting down this path of this medical emergency response teamwork. So I'm really happy that we were able to reconnect, bring her here today, and let her share a little bit about the work that she's been doing and continues to do at Billings Public Schools. So also, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Holly, I will monitor that for you. But at the end, we'll do our discussion opportunity. So
sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. It sounds like we've got a great turnout today. So I hope I'm able to actually help you guys with whatever questions and thoughts you might have. So I've been a school nurse with Billings Public Schools for the last 16 years. And I just took over as department chair this year for our nursing department. And one of the tasks that got put forth was creating a medical emergency response team. So this was all new to us. Really didn't have a whole lot of guidance on how to get going, but we knew that it was something that we needed to have. So let's just quickly talk about what a MERT team is. And the purpose of having a medical emergency response team in all of your schools is so that you can have a coordinated response to any kind of life-threatening event in your school. And you want to try and have it the same across all of your schools. Everybody has the same trainings. Everybody has the same foundations, so that everything is getting taken care of appropriately and up to par. right? It is not for just doing your basic first aid. Hopefully most of you have a school nurse that comes or goes. I know a lot of our rural communities do not. And so that really puts you guys at a disadvantage into what you can do and what you need. But your MERT team is not going to be for your basic first aid, right? This is truly for life-threatening events. And that was something I really had to stress in our district because we have a very large district. We've got a lot of schools, and the way I was able to get it across is we only have 17 nurses for our 34 buildings. So each nurse has 2 to 3 schools, and we're not always in the building. And so we need somebody there that is able to help with whatever type of emergency is truly going on, regardless of whether or not there's a nurse there. So they were very, very much game for that once we kind of got through a lot of the logistics. But one of the things that we talked about is like, okay, so what does a life-threatening event actually look like? So if somebody is unconscious, maybe not necessarily from just like passing out, right? We have a lot of fainting, particularly in our junior highs and high schools. But if somebody is truly unconscious, if they're having a seizure or they've never had one before, if you have a suspected heart attack or stroke, anaphylaxis, a severe asthma attack. So, maybe you've already started down your asthma action plan and they're just not getting better. Any major change in mental status, possible shock, severe bleeding, severe burns, compound fractures, and then any kind of fall where you're hitting your head, where you're having neck, back pain, or inability to move, and then drug overdoses. So I don't know how it's looking across the nation, but we do have Narcan training in our school district, and we have had to use it more than once in the last 5 years, every single year. So drug overdoses is a big one. And I know we're not the only people struggling with that as well. So when we started this whole process, we already do a lot of trainings as school nurses in our buildings, which was very helpful for this whole process. And then looking at the type of things that we needed to add in. So in our district, the nurses were already doing Narcan training, EpiPen training, and a basic asthma training, not so much on how to administer an inhaler, but how to be asthma-friendly schools, what asthma attacks look like, things like that. And then we're going to end up probably changing that as this legislation we're anticipating to go through for the stock albuterol. But trainings that we partnered in the past with pharmacists were the Glucagon trainings and the Seizure net trainings. And so that is something that we have taken on now, and we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But just as we were looking at things that we needed to do, and then trainings that we needed to start were CPR and first aid training. So in our district, it's not actually required that you have any type of CPR or first aid training outside of nursing. So it is required that if you leave campus, you have somebody that's first aid trained go with you, but it's just not something that the district themselves have been providing for staff. And that was something we really felt like we needed to take on to make sure that our staff was all encompassed and trained for all of the scenarios that we were going to be putting forth. So one of the first things you need to do is talk to your administration. I know we have some administrators on here too, which is absolutely fantastic. We know that all of our districts are set up a little bit differently. So this was just kind of my line that I had to go through, but it took a while. We've been talking with our administrators in our district for several years about how important this was and how we needed to get it going. But I had to start with my immediate supervisor. And although I had their support and the importance, sometimes it's kind of hard to get moving up that ladder of who you need to talk to. So for me, it was talking with my immediate supervisor and getting that permission. And then I took it up to the supervisor of student services. And although he was supportive, as many districts struggle with, it's all about financial, right? Like, how can we go about this? We don't have the money to do that. So then I kind of got shuffled off to the safety director because this is a safety issue. And so I was able to get a lot farther in talking with our safety director because he could see, how important this was. And he kind of knew the steps that we needed to go to find the type of money that we needed. And then I got up to the assistant superintendent. And then I never actually ended up speaking to the superintendent myself, but then he had to give that final approval for us to continue to move forward. But I mean, we're talking about a good 6 months of me just having these conversations about why it was important and re-presenting all of that information so that everybody was hearing the same message over and over and over. So once I finally got approval to get moving forward, I looked for a class, and this particular class, not saying there's nothing better, this is just the one that I had found and ended up utilizing. They were great. It was very, very thorough. So it's an online class. It went from 7 to 1:30 and was $395 a person. So it was a little costly, but the district found the money to pay for myself and our safety director to go through it, so that there were a couple of us getting the same information, trying to get the same ideas. They were really, really thorough. They give a lot of great information. And if you are kind of back at that stage one and needing information on how to talk to your administration, this class actually really touches on that and gives you great information to bring forth. But if you take the class first, before you go through that approval, this might be a cost that you would have to take on yourself. So kind of keep that in mind. But they do give great talking points on if you have to talk to administration on why this is super, super important. But some other things that they talk about are receiving the training to enhance your team at each of your school sites and creating an implementation plan, learning highly effective practices to plan for and address those medical emergencies, receiving the tools and strategies and components you need to conduct the professional development to train and empower your staff, receive current best information and practices for the emergency management and all sorts of emergency related issues that can come up, and creating the responses that you'll have to those based off of the important local and national data and trends, facilitating clear communication and problem solving among the staff, learning strategies to build and support among your administrators and staff, and then how to delegate the appropriate roles and responsibilities, because the MERT team, there's lots of different roles. So it's great. You have lots of people that have different abilities, that they all want to help, but maybe their strength is not in administering medications. So knowing those different roles so that you can still bring other people in and have effective places to put them. But I got some great resources from them. I felt that it was definitely worth my while. I do know that there's other trainings out there. So again, this is not me endorsing this particular one. It just happens to be the one that I ended up taking. So after I took that, started looking at the big picture of how can I make sure that when we're moving forward, that we're doing it correctly and that everybody's covered, right? So that the staff that's willing to take on this training, that they're going to be covered by the policies and procedures and knowing that their job is safe. And then for us as the nurses, that as we continue to do these types of trainings, that we're going to be covered by our policies and procedures as well. So I am put on our school policy for Billings Public Schools right here, but just in case you need to look at changing your own policy, ours that we already have, and I bolded it so that you could see it. The policy itself is more a protection for the staff that is going to be giving this. So it just says, in the absence of your school nurse, that you as the staff, if trained appropriately under Montana state law and our own policies and procedures, are covered not under the school nurse's license. So when we do trainings, that it talks about that on our training paperwork that we have them sign off. But really what it's stating is that the district will take the liability away because they're being properly trained. And then under the Good Samaritan Act, that they are covered as well. So luckily, I didn't have to change any policy because changing policy is really, really a big to-do and very time-consuming. But I did needed to change some procedural language. That was more so to cover the nurses and making sure that we have that same support from the district that the staff does when they're doing the training. So I put our procedure here as well. But the big parts that we had to change here, the Glucagon and the seizure trainings that we had been doing, we've been partnering with pharmacists for years to come in and do this training. But as we continued to grow with just the amount of students that had these problems and the schools continued to grow, it got harder and harder to get people to come in and do these trainings. So one thing that came out of COVID that was really good was doing all of this stuff via Zoom. And so we really started to utilize these Zoom meetings to be able to get a large amount of our staff trained with one training instead of having them come in. But we also ran into the problem of, when can everybody do it? What days, what times? Every Wednesday, we have an early out for PLCs, and we have a lot of principals that don't want to utilize that for staff training for things like this because they have it set out for others. And so we had to get a little creative. And what I ended up doing, starting back in with our COVID years, was I created an online training for all of our staff. So I just did these videos that we could put out to all of our staff for all of our trainings. And then we would do a hands-on test in each of our buildings afterwards. So they would watch it on their own time, and then they would be able to come in and do it. So because we were able to add the school nurse onto this verbiage for the Glucagon and the seizure training, I was able to do the same type of videos for those trainings as well. And the great thing with that is now we know that every single person that's coming through is getting the exact same information and has the exact same tests. Because even when we had different pharmacists coming in, their training's going to look a little bit different for each person, for each school. And so now we just have everything super consistent. And we have great relationships here with some of our specialty doctors. So I was able to get them the videos that I generated, and they gave me some great feedback. And so they felt that those trainings were also very comprehensive for our students. So that was wonderful. So I have the approval. I have the basic training on how to get it started. We've got our policy and procedure set up and in place. But I pretty much had a blank slate, and I wasn't quite sure where to get started. But what I know is that across the nation, there are MERT teams all over, and as there are in the state of Montana. So a big shout out to Missoula and Great Falls. You guys are amazing. I reached out to your charge nurses out there, and they were phenomenal about sending me all of their information and just helping me get started. So I kind of used both of their templates and utilized everything that they had, and then just kind of changed a little bit here and there what we needed for billings to make it work, because we're here for each other, guys, right? Nobody needs to be starting all over when there's already so many other resources out there. So they were amazing and really got me going well on my way. So I got it all put together. Took me a while, a little bit longer than I anticipated, but we got there. And I took my plan out to administration, and I was like, okay, here we go. Here's all of the information. Here's all of the trainings. And here are the days that I would like us to get all of our MERT teams put together and trained. And initially they were like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds fantastic. But as we started looking at these PIR days, what I found out is all of these PIR days are already kind of pre-planned and set as to very specific trainings for all of these teachers and what they need to be doing. And so although I had initially been told, absolutely, you can have these days to do these trainings, we had to step back and start all over again, because I was not able to actually use any of those days. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but we're getting there. So what we ended up doing for this year is I got all of those trainings approved. I got them out. And we just put out all of these videos to our staff this year. And each nurse in each of the buildings just had to set up very specific times with each of these members to get their hands-on training done. So it has literally taken us all year to get all of our trainings done because of the way everything has slowly been rolling out, and one thing gets approved and I have to wait for something else. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but we're getting there. And hopefully by next year, we'll be able to get it all together and put it in the very beginning. We were able to get 6 of us trained as trainers for CPR and first aid as well. We ended up making a contract with Billings Clinic, which was wonderful. So we helped them out with their high school trainings for 2 years, and they paid for our train the trainer sessions and have helped us find some wonderful donors to help get us started up with our CPR trainings. So I've had to utilize Wednesdays and get permission from all of the principals. And so several Wednesdays we started back in January. We've been doing CPR trainings on Wednesdays from 2:45 to 6:45 as well. So we've been able to train a little over 150 of our staff members so far for our CPR training and first aid. And then again, for all of the other trainings we've been doing with our MERT teams, it's been kind of just that one-on-one with that school nurse whenever they all have time to get together. Luckily, each MERT team in each school is anywhere between 3 to 6 people. So it's not a large amount of people. It's just finding that time to get it done. But I reached out to all the pharmaceutical companies, and they were fantastic. So when we were setting up our trainings, they just donated all of the trainers. So I was able to get 34 of all the different types of Glucagon trainings and the seizure medication trainings. We already had all of our EpiPen trainers from the years throughout, but they've been great. They were easy to work with, and they had no problem sending that large amount of trainers. So for next year, the things that we're working on this year is by the end of this year, we hope to already know who's going to be on our MERT team for next year. We've tried to ask them to sign on for 2 years at a time, but this year was just so up in the air that it was kind of hard. Nobody really knew what they were getting into. But we're going to talk with our principals, and we're going to decide who's going to be on the MERT team for next year. So it is completely voluntary. Obviously you can't force somebody to do this, because then they're not really covered when it comes to that Good Samaritan, because that has to be voluntary. But really haven't had that hard of a time finding people that want to help, right? There's always somebody out there that's just willing to go that extra mile. So we're going to know who it is. We're going to send out the MERT book that I generated, which I've attached at the end of this. And that has all of the training videos. And so over the summer, we're asking them to watch all of these training videos again. And then that first week that we gather together before our students come, each of us nurses is going to set up a day with that school MERT team and do that hands-on session before the students even come. So they will be fully trained and prepared and ready to go before school starts next year. That's our goal. So the first aid type of training is going to be every year. And then the Narcan and the CPR training is every 2 years. So I am working on getting it approved that I can actually get those trainings for our PIR days starting into next year. So if I can get it permanently on the docket as like required training like they do for other stuff, I'll be able to move forward with that. But I'm still working with our administrators on trying to get that approved. But in the meantime, we have been able to get professional development hours and OPI hours for the Narcan, CPR first aid. And I'm also working on, with our administrators, getting those personal development hours for the MERT teams in general, because there are so many trainings and then the hands-on portions that they have to do as well, just so that, you know, there's some kind of benefit to signing on for it. And then the last thing we're still working on is each MERT team and each school is supposed to have their MERT bag. And so the next slide talks about what's in it. But we had hoped that the schools would each be willing to just kind of jump in and be like, yeah, we'll pay for this medical emergency response bag. And that really hasn't happened. So we are still working on trying to find some funding to put all of those bags together so that we can have those for the start of the next year as well. So in the MERT bag, I've listed everything here that we're going to have. Most of it is just your kind of common first aid stuff that you would need to stop bleeds, right? To help with shock, to help with low blood sugars. We're going to keep our stock EpiPens and Narcan in there. And then if the stock albuterol passes and the district is able to figure out how we would do that, we'll have the stock albuterol in that as well. And then here is the link to all of the lovely paperwork that took me forever to generate. But it's a lot of paperwork, but it's really not. The MERT training book, it talks about what your MERT team is. So like if you're trying to talk to your administrators about what it is and what you can do with it and what all of those rules are, that's all in that first part of the MERT training book. The second part is our first aid, right? So that's going to be in with the MERT bag. And it gives a whole bunch of different algorithms for your basic people. It has all of your training forms. It's going to have all of your paperwork, like if we were to have to give a stock EpiPen, or if we were to give Glucagon or Narcan, we have paperwork that we have the staff fill out. So that's all in there as well. And then a little nurse to-do checklist to make sure that you have everything ready to go for your trainings for each year.